The views and opinions expressed on America's Workforce Union podcast and its digital media channels are solely those of the speakers and do not necessarily represent the views and opinions of the producers or sponsors.
Welcome to the America's Workforce Radio Podcast, the flagship production of the American Workers Radio and Podcast Network, where organized labor and its never-ending fight to protect the rights of the American worker come first. Now, presented by LIUNA, Laborers International Union of North America. Here's your host, Ed Flash Ferentz.
We're seeing some movement on the Faster Labor Contracts Act. Meanwhile, no strike at Samsung. And today on the show, our independent labor voice, Tom Buffenbarger, will be joining us. Welcome to the Wednesday, May 27th edition of America's Workforce, where we're available on at least 5 platforms. That includes YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. Featured guest today, Tom Buffenbarger, longtime contributor of America's Workforce. Tom served as general president of the Machinists Union for 18 years. He'd been retired for almost, or maybe over a decade now. Tom, 50 years plus as a member of the Machinists. For complete updates, go to goiam.org, and we salute the Machinists for becoming one of our sponsors once again here on America's Workforce. We appreciate that. First thing Tom is going to talk about is the rise of China and the challenge to American jobs. And we have seen this over the last, almost 3 decades now. You know, we normalized relations with China back in 2000, 2001. And since that time, we have seen a major exodus of jobs. Millions of jobs have left this country. Why? Because corporations want cheap labor. And one of the things we're going to talk about, electric vehicles. Did you know that 70% of all new electric vehicles come from China? That's right. That's right. And as a result, it has a lot of automakers here in this country scrambling and worrying if they are allowed to sell their vehicles here. The vehicles that China is producing range somewhere between $14,000 and $18,000. Do you realize how consumers would react to that? Wow. So we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about the Faster Labor Contracts Act. I'm going to give you some more details on that coming up. But anybody that has been involved in an organizing campaign knows how difficult it is to get that first contract. Well, there's some legislation that's pending in Washington that would move that along. And Tom will speak to what's been happening at an Apple store in Maryland, where the Machinists organized. They didn't get a contract, and what do? They closed the store. I mean, we've seen that time and time again. We're also going to talk about the Labor Department. There's a number of people in Congress right now that are fighting the administration because they plan to cut anywhere between 20 and 25% for the Department of Labor's budget for the 2027 fiscal year. They're getting some pushback on this. What's that going to mean? I mean, the Labor Department, think about what's in the Labor Department. OSHA, safety on the job. That's just one of many. Wage and hour. There's a lot that concerns workers here. What's that going to mean? Tom will talk about that as well. Now, a brief look into the world of labor. The segment brought to you by Boyd Watterson Asset Management. You can find more at boydwatterson.com. Now, a majority of House representatives have signed what they call a discharge petition for the Faster Labor Contracts Act, reaching the 218-member threshold, which is necessary to bypass House leadership and put the bill directly on the House floor. The act, which was introduced in September of last year, would require employers and unions to engage in mediation if they fail to come to a collective bargaining agreement within 90 days of bargaining. That's huge. If mediation fails, an arbitration panel will render a final decision on the terms of the CBA. Now, this would radically alter the National Labor Relations Act current bargaining process, under which the board cannot compel parties to agree to contractual provisions, with employers facing new consequences for what they call surface bargaining and prolonged negotiations. Just over a third of new bargaining units achieve an initial CBA within 1 year. Now, the Faster Labor Contracts Act maintains a degree of bipartisan support, which I might point out is unusual for labor legislation. While the discharge petition enjoys the support of the vast majority of House Democrats, 7 Republican members also signed to support the bill. And in the Senate, the act's sponsor is Missouri Republican Josh Hawley. So, here's the deal. The discharge petition will force the House to vote on the bill in the coming weeks, and if it passes, it will face a Republican majority Senate. We'll see what happens here. Samsung and its electronics labor union have reached a last-minute tentative agreement ahead of their strike deadline, which was last week, avoiding what had threatened to become a crippling strike at the world's largest memory chip maker. Listen to this. Samsung stood to lose between $14 billion and $20.49 billion in profits during the scheduled 18-day-long strike, with more than 45,000 workers expected to participate. One union leader stated during a televised briefing, this was last Wednesday, that union members will vote on the tentative agreement between now and it should be wrapping up tomorrow or Friday. Although details of the tentative agreement were not fully public at the time of the writing, Associated Press reported that a senior Samsung official suggested the parties had agreed to expand bonuses beyond the company's lucrative memory chip division to less profitable units. One more note here. Last week, the district court partially granted Samsung's injunction request, which ordered the union to maintain certain staffing levels to prevent damage to facilities and materials during the strike, if it happened, and also barring union members from occupying key facilities and offices. Registered nurses with St. Mary of Nazareth Hospital in Chicago are holding a rally today at the hospital to protest their employer Prime Healthcare's illegal crackdown on their efforts to unionize, which include the recent firing of 4 nurse leaders. The unions wish to join National Nurses United and last week filed for an election with the National Labor Relations Board. They want union representation so they can improve working conditions for themselves and, in turn, provide better and safer care for their patients. Just days after filing, the hospital fired 4 nurses, among those leading the union campaign for passing out flyers outside employee entrances, long recognized as protected union activity. The nurses demand the reinstatement of their colleagues, a fast and fair election, and to freely exercise their labor organizing rights. Keisha Branch, a St. Mary of Nazareth Emergency Department RN, said, "This is Chicago, and you know what? We're a union town. Nurses in our community are here to tell Prime that they cannot get away with this. Nurses at St. Mary, just like the rest of the city, are hungry for union representation so we can better our workplaces and ultimately take better care of our patients." More than 400 RNs work at St. Mary of Nazareth. National Nurses United also represents about 2,500 nurses and healthcare workers working at Prime Healthcare facilities in California as well as Nevada. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, our independent labor voice, Tom Buffenbarger, will be joining us.
You're listening to America's Workforce with Ed Flash Ferens.
It takes LiUNA to keep America running. Over 70,000 public employees are part of LIUNA, the Laborers International Union of North America, delivering critical services such as healthcare and emergency response, as well as maintaining roads and sanitation systems. Even the National Postal Mail Handlers Union, representing over 47,000 U.S. postal workers, is affiliated with LIUNA. Find out what it takes for LIUNA to keep America running at liuna.org. That's liuna.org.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Communication Workers of America. You can find more at cwa-union.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Iron Workers. You can find more at ironworkers.org.
American workers are sick of struggling to get by. It's time to get ahead. In the Teamsters Union, workers are winning industry-leading contracts, historically high wages, fully paid health care, and retirement benefits you can count on. Across the country, Teamsters fight alongside our brothers and sisters to secure a better life. It's what we've been doing and how we've been living for more than a century. When we fight, we win. Join us. Be a Teamster.
America's Workforce is sponsored in part by Boyd Watterson Asset Management, LLC. Find out more about our investment solutions tailored to meet the needs of Taft-Hartley funds at boydwatterson.com.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, where you can find more at teamster.org.
There is unity and strength for workers.
We are the USW.
We are the USW.
The United Steelworkers.
The largest industrial union in North America.
We represent 850,000 members in the U.S., Canada, and the Caribbean.
We work in metals,
rubber,
chemicals,
paper,
oil refining,
atomic energy, and the service sector.
We are steelworkers, standing strong and fighting for what's right.
Now, back to America's Workforce. Here's Ed Flash Farrens.
And remember, you can check us out on Facebook or follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter. That would be AWF Union Podcast, AWF Union Podcast. Let's go to our featured guest today. Tom Buffenbarger is his name. Longtime contributor of America's Workforce, former general president of the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers. At the national website, goiam.org. And if you go there, there's a lot of information. I guess they're moving toward some rail safety legislation, which is a good thing. Faster labor contracts. Boy, I'll tell you, there's a lot of union leaders that can speak to that. Tom's going to be one of them. And also the situation with China. Came across a story here, Tom. Welcome back to the show. That 70% of all new electric vehicles, EVs, now come from China. Now, they're not coming here, but if they come here, wow, this will be devastating to the U.S. auto industry. And I know they're trying everything they can to put the stops on this. I'd like to get your input on this one. And Tom, you and I have talked about this so many times. We created what China has become. When you go back to PNTR, when we normalized relations with China, they were nowhere near what they are today. We opened the door, and I'll tell you, we created a whole lot of problems. Go ahead, my brother.
Well, the China story continues to be an ever-evolving one, Flash, and it contains no good news for the United States. Your observation that 70% of electric vehicles now come from China, and they're going every place in the world. They're dominating the electric vehicle market. And when we figure out what we're going to do, at least here in the United States, it's going to be too late. The U.S. market alone cannot handle the EVs produced now by the big three and stuff. It's just not big enough for them. So they have to compete with China on a global scale, and China is already eating our cake. It's bad news, and it goes back to even before preferred trading status with China, is when Boeing wanted to build factories and move work from Seattle to China. And they said they're going to buy a bunch of our airplanes if we put some work over there. So we're going to put a little work that's not too dangerous for us, no critical technologies. And they went ahead and did that. And today, China produces an airplane that looks just like a Boeing because we kept sending more and more pieces of the work, pieces of the puzzle to China in exchange for sales. And what became apparent to me back then was capitalist. What we're all about in the United States of America, capitalism. Well, the capitalists love the communists. That's where they wanted to send all our jobs, all our work. And the great factor in this to be considered was the cost of labor and the control of labor. So we send our jobs, we send our products to be built in China, all the time wave that American flag, defend your nation, for the capitalists who are in love with the communist system. And it's come back to bite us in the butt. This is where we're at today. I look, China's sitting back. They just had a visit from President Trump. They're wondering what the heck is going on in this nation. We're in a war in the Middle East. We've got these little military excursions going on around the world, troop deployments without end, doing all this, burning up defensive capabilities of the United States, as well as any offensive advantages we have. That's one thing. So China's eyeing Taiwan, where we rely, again, on a lot of foreign goods that come from that nation. They're eyeing to take it over, maybe a military adventure on behalf of China. I'm not sure. But the fact of the matter is we are depleting our ability to defend our allies and ourselves. We're engaged in economic and military gamesmanship with the second biggest economy in the world, soon to become the biggest. And this country's in trouble. And I open up my paper today and to see on the day after Memorial Day, when we commemorate the sacrifices brought on us by wars and honor those who served our nation so bravely, I look to see that our biggest concern in our country is a ballroom. I really worry about where this country is headed now. And it's serious. And China poses a great threat. It's not going to go away. They are a very capable nation. We're the ones that are in their sights. We're the target.
Tom, you and I have been talking about this for years now. Do you see some cracks in the armor here? Do you see some more people, especially in the Congress, saying, enough is enough. We got to do something. We got to save America. No pun there. And I'm not talking about voting rights. I'm talking about, preserving jobs, moving the country forward, more scientific research, developing jobs here in the United States. What do you see?
What I do see people starting to wake up and they're starting to speak out. We've seen these rallies across the country over the past year, the No Kings rally, but it's more than a protest against the current administration. People are screaming about a fair break in life, and they don't see their government fighting for that for them. And I believe that politicians on both sides of the aisle are starting to hear a loud and clear message that unless something starts to happen and we address the concern of jobs, of health care, of food security, of housing in America, maybe this system we're living in today isn't the system we need anymore. And that's a growing movement. We see it every time they have these No Kings rallies. Now, I believe those who are some among the strongest supporters of this administration are starting to see that just supporting this administration isn't enough for the voters back home. You're seeing things happen now, congressmen and senators saying things, doing things, willing to grow a spine and stand up for what's right in this country. It's proof, Flash, it's proof that collective activity, people working together for a common goal, for a common good, can have an effect and it can make a change. And I hope it continues until we can realize those changes and start this country back moving forward again.
You know, when you talk about collective action, you talk about unions, my friend. I mean, that's what unions are all about, collective action, collective bargaining. I want to talk about this Faster Labor Contracts Act, and I'm seeing some movement in it. And look, Tom, you've got a lot of experience, over 50 years with the Machinists Union. You've negotiated contracts, and, you know, it's great when you organize, and there's a lot of organizing going on in America right now because of the things we're talking about on this podcast. I mean, organize. You got to keep organizing. But getting that first contract, that's an issue. This legislation, I think, would certainly help that. But you can speak to what's going on right now. What was it, that Apple store in Maryland, right?
The IAM organized one of the first organized Apple stores in the country in Baltimore. And it was a very carefully planned and executed organizing drive because we were dealing with a type of an industry, a service industry, dealing with customers and technology. It's a combination effort. And we won the organizing drive. We had to go to an election. We won it, and we won it handily. Then came the real challenge. We thought organizing an Apple store and the opposition from Apple would be tough, but getting to that first contract was a killer, a multi-year effort to secure a first contract for a relatively small group of very critical employees. And Apple played every single trick in the book from all the union busters. They combined it into a giant manual and applied it in this issue. So we finally get things settled in and get a contract. Despite all the obstacles, then Apple announces, well, they're going to close some stores. And guess what? They closed all their unionized stores first.
Isn't that illegal, Tom?
Oh, yeah. It's illegal if you've got an enforcement mechanism inside the government that will actually go out and prosecute the violations of the law. But since we haven't had that for a while, nothing will probably be done about this. And I have to say, the Machinists Union has some very skilled attorneys in this field. They've got a huge job ahead of them trying to protect those members and maybe get a reversal of this decision. You know, one of the things that sticks in my craw about the Apple case is I remember attending the Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights Awards dinner one night up in New York City, and Tim Cook, the chairman of Apple, was one of the recipients. I'm thinking about reaching out to the RFK Center, those people who run it are friends, and say they should ask Tim Cook to give back that honor he received as a champion of human rights when it doesn't bother him in the slightest to wipe out people's jobs, their futures, everything they hope to gain in life. Something's wrong with that picture.
That's just another company in America that gets most of their labor from China.
Yes.
That's it.
Leaps and bounds. I mean, Tim Cook was traveling with the president to protect the interests of Apple in China. I don't know. We can build that stuff here. And get the right tools and the right investments, we can do it in a competitive fashion with China. But when you're dealing with a nation and a regime that's admired by the capitalists, the captains of industry, they can get work done at gunpoint or threat of human existence. We need to take it on.
Tom, another issue is the Labor Department. We've seen a change in leadership there. And before that happened, there were a number of reports that they want to cut their funding up to 25%. when you hear that, and this is an agency that's seen dramatic cuts in funding over the years, but you think about what the Labor Department does, and OSHA is part of that. That's got to scare you as a former union leader.
They cut the wrong things at the Department of Labor. Safety should be promoted. Training and skills programs, apprenticeships should be promoted. We get those promises from the politicians, and then when the time comes to actually put some money behind the promise, they run for the hills. They'll fund the persecution of labor unions, people who work in shops, who toil hard every day for a paycheck, and then trying to get enforcement of the fair wage laws across this country is virtually non-existent. They're cutting the wrong things. I'm beginning to wonder, FDR it was a great idea, and Frances Perkins became the first Secretary of Labor. Matter of fact, the first woman on many fronts to have such an important role. And she set into motion what should be our goals in a industrial society. We've forgotten all of that. We've retreated from it. I'm beginning to question the value of the Department of Labor's mission and what it's supposed to be doing for American working people. It's not been a promotion department for some time. It's been a persecution department. So we have to stick it out. We have to make changes where voters can do that and get this agency back on track. Safety in the workplace. We just celebrated another Workers' Memorial Day here on April 28th. It's still astonishing to learn the numbers of people that still die on the job every year in this country. There is no excuse for this. I just hope one day there's things working through Congress now. I don't know if it goes anywhere, but it would be a dramatic step in the right direction. Rail safety being one.
Yeah, that's an issue that's getting some movement, but we'll save that for another show. It's funny you mentioned the Workers' Memorial Day. We did a lot on that with regard to worker safety. And first of all, I downloaded the report and I realized, oh my God, I can't print this out. But those of you listening, especially union leaders, you can contact the AFL-CIO. If you go to aflcio.org, and they mailed me the Death on the Job report, the toll of neglect. It's about a little over an inch thick, very comprehensive. I mean, they cover it all. They take a look into what happened in America over since OSHA started, which was signed into law by Richard Nixon. We're talking the Occupational Safety and Health Act. So
even he encouraged its passage. That's pretty amazing.
I know. That was a different time in America, no doubt about that. Tom, you take care. Tom Buffenbarger, our independent labor voice here on America's Workforce. Go IAM.org for complete updates from the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, where Tom spent most of his life. You take care. We'll talk to you next month. Okay, brother?
Okay. Best to you and the listeners, Flash.
And that'll be it for yet another edition of America's Workforce. Tomorrow, the heat and frost insulators. Until then, all of you have a safe and wonderful day.
That concludes another episode of the America's Workforce Radio Podcast. Thanks for listening, and be sure to subscribe so you never miss a show. America's Workforce is a production of Labor Tools and BMA Media Group. Find out more information online at labortools.com.